a story about a shaft sealed in 1933. A miner refused to talk about anything above a whisper, and a man named Elias Heartwell who went below it in the spring of 1962 and came back convinced that something impossible was still alive beneath the mountain. When Hartwell resurfaced after 14 hours underground, his hair had turned completely white. His mining lamp was gone. And for 9 days he refused to say a single word. Then finally, sitting in a hospital chair with coal dust still trapped beneath his fingernails, he spoke. "The deepest support beam down there," he said, "wasn't built by any company I ever heard of." Then he said something even stranger, something as still using it. "Tonight we're going underground, not just into abandoned mines, but into a mystery that may stretch far deeper than coal seams, forgotten tunnels, or even recorded American history itself. Long before Centralia became famous for the underground fire, it was just another Pennsylvania mining town, a hard place. The kind of place where children learned early that coal paid for everything. The churches, the groceries, the heat in winter, and the funerals. By the early 20th century, nearly every family in Centralia depended on the mines in one way or another. Men disappeared underground before sunrise and came back blackened with coal dust after dark, if they came back at all. Mining accidents were common enough that most families kept funeral clothes prepared year-round. And over time, the miners developed beliefs that outsiders laughed at. They talked about dead tunnels, passages where sound stopped behaving normally, sections underground where lantern flames dimmed for no reason, invisible warm spots deep beneath the rock. Most ignored the stories, but certain names kept surfacing again and again. Number 7 shaft was one of them. Older miners avoided discussing it directly. Some refused to even walk near its entrance after sunset. One former mule driver claimed that sometime around 1910, his animals refused to descend into number 7, no matter how hard they were beaten. Another worker swore he heard metal grinding far below the active tunnels late one night after every machine in the mine had already been shut down. He described it as enormous gears slowly turning somewhere in the darkness. Then there was the story about the surveyors. 2 men were sent down in 1933 to measure the lower sections of the shaft shortly before the tunnel was sealed forever. Official reports claimed methane killed them, but according to miners who worked there at the time, the bodies that came back up showed no burns, no explosion damage, and no signs of collapse. Just expressions of absolute terror frozen permanently onto their faces. That story stayed buried for nearly 30 years, until Elias Heartwell came looking for answers. Heartwell had spent most of his life underground. He was born in 1919 in company housing owned by the Lehigh Valley Coal Company. His grandfather mined coal. His father mined coal. And by 16, Elias was already descending into shafts deeper than most men could tolerate. People later described him as quiet but observant, the kind of miner who noticed tiny changes in air pressure before cave-ins happened, the kind of man who remembered old stories long after everyone else dismissed them. And there was one story he never forgot. One winter night in 1939, his father came home drunk and unusually shaken. According to Elias, the old man admitted that certain sections beneath Centralia had been marked off-limits long before number 7 was sealed. Not because they were unstable, because company officials had found something they did not understand. The next morning, when Elias tried asking about it again, his father acted like the conversation had never happened. Years passed, the mines expanded, men died, the stories faded. Then in February of 1962, a retired engineer named Wilhelm Brandt knocked on Hartwell's door carrying a folded map, and everything changed. Wilhelm Brandt was dying. Black lung had reduced the former engineer to a coughing skeleton living alone in a rented room in Shamokin. But despite his condition, miners still respected him. Brandt had overseen structural inspections for hundreds of mine shafts throughout Pennsylvania. He was known for precision, for discipline, for never exaggerating, which is exactly why Heartwell listened carefully when Brandt asked him a strange question. Do you want to know why they really sealed number 7? Brant explained that he had personally supervised the closure in 1933. And according to him, the official methane explanation was false. Something else had forced the company to abandon the shaft, something discovered far deeper underground than public records admitted existed. Then Brant unfolded the map. It showed 27 support beams descending through the shaft, but according to Brant, the official measurements had been falsified. Number 7 went far deeper than any government survey claimed. And beyond the 27th beam, the mine stopped looking like a mine altogether. Before Heartwell left, Brant gave him a final warning. If you reach the last beam, he said, don't stay longer than necessary. Heartwell asked him what was below it. Brant stared silently for several seconds before answering, I don't think it belongs to us. The descent began on April 11, 1962. Brant remained above ground beside a kerosene lantern and a field telephone connected through cables descending into the shaft. Heartwell carried only basic mining equipment, a carbide lamp, a canvas bag, and the map. At first, everything looked ordinary. Coal walls, old timber supports, rusting rails, the familiar smell of wet earth and anthracite dust. He counted each support beam carefully as he descended. Every fifth beam carried a metal plaque bolted directly into the stone. Not company markings, not inspection numbers, a symbol, a wheel nested inside another wheel, surrounded by strange writing. Heartwell later insisted the symbols resembled no language he had ever seen. The deeper he traveled, the stranger the environment became. At roughly beam 20, the temperature increased noticeably. Not slightly, dramatically, then the coal itself disappeared. The walls transformed into smooth black stone streaked with metallic veins that reflected light unnaturally. His lamp beam scattered strangely across the surface, bending in impossible directions, and the silence became overwhelming. No dripping water, no settling rock, no distant machinery, just breathing bootsteps, and somewhere beneath it all a low vibration. At beam 26, Brant's voice vanished from the field telephone completely. No crackling, no warning, silence. Heartwell was now far deeper underground than official records claimed the shaft even extended. Most men would have turned back. He continued downward. Then he reached the final beam. The 27th beam was unlike anything above it. It wasn't timber, it wasn't metal. Heartwell described it as a dark material that felt warm beneath his gloves. Its surface had been carved with thin symbols that looked partially melted into the structure itself. That was the moment fear truly hit him. Not panic, recognition. The realization that whatever existed below had not been built by miners. He crossed beneath the beam anyway, and entered a corridor no modern mining company should have been capable of creating. The tunnel beyond was perfectly cylindrical, smooth, balanced, engineered with impossible precision. There were no blast marks, no support structures, no signs of excavation. The walls appeared seamless. Along the corridor sat recessed alcoves carved directly into the stone. Inside each alcove rested objects Heartwell later struggled to describe, dark metallic shapes, some circular, some geometric, all covered in dust, all arranged carefully, almost ceremonially, as though the hallway had once served as more than a passageway. Then the corridor opened into a chamber, and the story became truly difficult to explain. The room was illuminated without any visible light source. The walls themselves glowed faintly. Heartwell extinguished his lamp just to test whether exhaustion was affecting him. The chamber remained lit. At its center stood a machine, tall, cylindrical, metallic, still operating despite decades, perhaps centuries, underground. The device emitted a steady hum and radiated noticeable heat. Heartwell compared the sound to a tuning fork vibrating endlessly in complete darkness. Not mechanical exactly, something stranger, something resonant. Then he noticed the doorway. A massive black stone slab sealed flush into the far wall. No hinges, no visible opening mechanism, only the symbol, the wheel inside the wheel. Around the doorway were carvings, maps, star patterns, strange coastlines unlike any modern geography. In one final image, a face, almost human, but subtly wrong. Hartwell would later say the proportions disturbed him in ways he could not explain. He stood there staring at the sealed doorway while the humming echoed through the chamber walls, and slowly an overwhelming certainty settled into his mind. The door wasn't keeping intruders out, it was containing something. Then his carbide lamp suddenly died, instantly, as though someone had pinched the flame closed with invisible fingers. The glowing chamber remained bright around him, and for the first time in his life, Elias Heartwell felt genuinely terrified underground, not of collapse, not of gas, of being watched, so he turned around and left. When Heartwell finally reached the surface nearly 14 hours later, dawn had already broken over Centralia. Wilhelm Brandt took one look at him and understood immediately. Hartwell's hair had gone completely white during the climb back up. Neither man spoke much afterward. 3 days later, Brandt died from complications linked to black lung disease. And the map disappeared from public view forever. But the strange events surrounding Centralia were only beginning, because 1 month later the fire started. In May of 1962, a landfill fire ignited above exposed coal seams near Centralia. Officials believed it would burn out naturally. It never did. Instead, the fire spread underground and continued expanding year after year. Roads buckled from the heat. Steam erupted from cracks in the earth. Carbon monoxide seeped into homes. Entire neighborhoods became unsafe. By the 1980s, the federal government began relocating residents permanently. Most left, a few refused, and to this day the fire still burns beneath Centralia. But several details about the disaster remain deeply unsettling. Thermal imaging studies reportedly revealed that parts of the underground heat pattern descended almost vertically, instead of spreading naturally through horizontal coal seams. One leaked assessment allegedly placed the center of the heat anomaly nearly 4,000 feet underground, the same depth Heartwell claimed to have reached. Then came the sinkhole incident in 1981. A 12-year-old boy named Todd Domboski suddenly fell through the earth when the ground beneath him collapsed without warning. The sinkhole dropped over 100 feet downward before superheated gas prevented further measurement. He survived only by grabbing exposed roots near the edge. After that, fear spread rapidly, because people realized the ground beneath Centralia was no longer stable. And maybe it never had been. Years later, researchers investigating old mining records uncovered additional strange details. Missing survey documents, altered depth reports, maps with handwritten corrections. Then in 2009, a doctoral researcher named Daniel Vega reportedly discovered a photograph dating back to the early 1900s. The image showed an iron plaque attached to a mining beam deep underground. Engraved into the plaque was the same symbol Heartwell described decades earlier, the wheel within the wheel. Vega attempted to publish the image. Academic journals rejected it repeatedly. He later uploaded it online. The website disappeared within a year, and Vega himself vanished entirely from public academic life soon afterward. No interviews, no lectures, nothing. Still, copies of the photograph allegedly survive among private researchers, and according to those who have seen it, the symbol matches Heartwell's description exactly. Elias Heartwell died in 1988. According to one nurse present during his final hours, his last words were spoken quietly while staring toward the window. "It's still turning," he whispered. Maybe he imagined everything. Maybe decades underground damaged his mind. Or maybe beneath the burning ruins of Centralia, something ancient still hums in the darkness below the final beam. Something hidden long before modern America existed. Something nobody was ever supposed to find. And maybe that sealed doorway is still there tonight, 4,000 feet beneath the earth, waiting, listening, turning. If this investigation stayed with you, share it with someone who still believes history may contain things we were never meant to uncover. Because sometimes the strangest stories are not the ones invented, they are the ones buried. Until next time, stay out of the deep tunnels.